Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to our Bible study. We're turning out to have a number of people that are watching us online, but I'll tell you something. Mr. Tommy here, who is in our class, provided Apple Jacks last Sunday, and you could come here and get Apple Jacks. And if you have comments, you could actually sit here and make them. So we're at 500 North Queen Street in downtown Kinston, North Carolina. Come see us, okay? Today we're going to be picking up again on chapter 2. Now we're going to start at verse 6 in chapter 2. Verse 6 is actually this section of Judges is actually the original introduction to Judges. The chapter 1 through 2:5 was a later addition. And what we got mostly from chapter 1 was a lot of conquest that took place after the death of Joshua, which in the book of Joshua happened before the death of Joshua. So there's a bit of a historical conflict there. Another thing is that it ends with an angel speaking to the people and telling them that they are going to mess up and that God doesn't like them anymore. So now we're going to pick up at verse 6 and see what happens from the kind of the original introduction to Joshua. A number of really good lessons in here, because Judges rather, understand that the book of Judges is all about how everything does not work, okay? So you're looking for why do things not work? And so we're going to discover that because there are a number of things in our own society today that do not work, okay? And maybe there's a similar reason. Who knows? We'll see. Okay. When Joshua dismissed the people, the Israelites all went to their own inheritance to take possession of the land. The people served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua, who had seen all the great work that the Lord had done for Israel. Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord. That title, servant of the Lord, has been reserved for only a few people in the Bible. You had David, Hezekiah. I'm trying to think of another king that got labeled. I was surprised that Josiah wasn't in there. But the prophet Isaiah, and then Jesus. So there are only a few people who are given the title servant of the Lord in the Bible. Moses was servant of the Lord. Okay. Died at the age of 110 years. So they buried him within the bounds of his inheritance in Timoth Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. Moreover, that whole generation was gathered to their ancestors, and another generation grew up after them who did not know the Lord or the work that the Lord had done for Israel. Okay, so what's going on here? Basically, the old timers have gone. Okay, now you've got a bunch of young whippersnappers coming along, and they have not seen the things that the elders saw. Does that sound familiar? You know, I'm thinking, I've been around a while. Tomorrow I'll celebrate going around again. But I've seen a lot of stuff, in my short time here. And I know that my grandchildren haven't seen the stuff that I've seen. And we look at sometimes what's going on in the church today, and we wonder how we got to where we are. And I'm sitting there with a bunch of young pastors, and I'm seeing them voting on things that I would never support, and I'm wondering, where are they coming from? Because they obviously haven't seen the stuff that I've seen. They didn't live through certain events that I've lived through, and so they don't have the same appreciation or the same cautions that I would give them in my lifetime. But at the same time, hear me out, okay? Because this is fair. This new generation hasn't seen the stuff that the old generation saw.
Yeah, but the old generation is what they were to tell every day or every week. They were supposed to go over the law in the book with the generation. So we can't always blame it on the younger generation.
No, we can't.
So those that came before obviously didn't do their job well to prepare the younger generation for what was to come.
Exactly. That's a lot of it's on them. A lot of it is on the Levites, as far as I'm concerned, because the Levites were tasked with teaching the new generation. Okay, so that somebody blew it. Somebody blew it.
Sort of like today, a lot of it's on the Democrats.
Well,
Oh, you're going there? Really?
let's not.
I'm just saying, it's like history.
Yeah, let's not. Let's not limit this to one generation.
But
Okay.
sometimes the new, the young generation, they're not tainted, like we are. And they will, make decisions because they haven't seen, and sometimes it's a good decision. A lot of times it's a good decision.
Okay,
Because they've not had they're not tainted.
this is good. Okay,
But it's the
what
same
you
thing from our parents' generation to
Right.
us.
that's right.
Every generation, you look down at the generation behind you, I'm sure my parents looked down and thought, what is coming to the world now? Look at this.
Exactly,
You know.
exactly. And this is what you're looking at is not some aberrant cycle. What you're looking at is something that happens with every generation. Okay, there were things that we rebelled against. I mean, my generation was from the 60s, so it's like, whoa. You look at all the stuff that we rebelled against, and in the process, look at all the stuff that we did that other generations should rebel against. Okay? Every generation brings joys and sorrows. And, it's just like, okay, I'm a preacher's kid. And there is just a standing stereotype in the church that if you're a preacher's kid, you're just not going to be as holy as your parents. And that's still true. But, every generation in some respects rebels against the generation before them. Now, let's take a look at the dynamics of what's going on today. This is really, I think, interesting. Because this rebellion is not always a bad thing. Okay? In my lifetime, there have been several generations. Okay? We've had my generation and generation following that has adopted all kinds of crazy ideas. I mean, really crazy ideas. We have ideas that people can determine what sex they are. We have ideas that humanity can control the climate. We have ideas that we ought to do away with borders and stuff. I mean, our generations, ours and the one following, have brought in some really aberrant ideas, and now there's a generation coming on with this Charlie Kirk thing. And you see rallies going on all over the world. So there's a generation coming on that's rebelling against all the nutty stuff that we've been promoting for a couple of generations. And it gives me hope, because sometimes what we would call rebellion can also be called revival. So now we're seeing greater attendance in churches with younger generations. They're more interested in their faith. Christianity has been attacked from every direction. It's been attacked from other religions. It's been attacked by governments. Okay, our own government included. I mean, we've been targeted by the FBI. Our own government has persecuted Christians and Christian ideas, and they've tried to silence us and all of that stuff. Now we have a generation that's just not going to shut up about that stuff, and they see that all these ideas that our generations have been promoting are dysfunctional in many respects, and they're not buying it. Because why? Because they can't find jobs, because they have other people taking their jobs from other places. The priorities have been off of them for their development. Their education has gone badly, and they're not as prepared as other countries are preparing their kids. So You know, I mean, look at all the H-2B visas that are given instead of American workers, and you know, we're just now coming into a time where it makes sense for a person to go get a skill, you know, to get educated in a skill instead of going to a college that you could never pass. You know, it's just we've moved, okay, and the things that have been promoted for a couple of generations don't work. You know?
Well, plus we have all the technology.
Yes.
AI.
Yes. And yeah.
I mean, we were talking recently, we were growing up, I remember the TVs first came in, we had a TV in our house. And now.
And now you got social media and TikTok and all of that, you know, and we're learning that AI can be a really, really good thing, and it can be a really disastrous thing, you know.
But they're having to figure all that out, and I admire them.
I do too. They have some real challenges. They have some real challenges. Now, I don't think that AI is going to do away with a lot of jobs. I think there are jobs that probably will be replaced, but I think that just like when people started using computers, they said, oh, this is going to do away with jobs. How many jobs are out there that are using computers, you know? I mean, it's increased the employment exponentially. And I knew that they said that computers would also do away with paper, yet the paper industry is just booming because of computers. So, you know, all these predictions, you know, when I was in my 20s, they were telling me that by the time I got to be the age I am, I'd be living under ice. You know, and then we got global warming. Whew, what a relief. And, you know, and that global warming would be a terrible thing, that we'd all be burning up. And yet instead, what we're finding is that people are able to raise crops further north than they had before, that there's a potential opening up for the Northwest Passage that'll improve commerce and speed up commerce. Just all, you know, because the glaciers are melting. And, you know, it's not all a bad thing. And I know that they were predicting that the island of Manhattan would be underwater. Well, Manhattan is full of building cranes and construction and stuff, so somebody's not buying it. So, you know, there are a lot of misconceptions that have been forced down our throats, and you know, now they're starting to look at, you know, where did all these crazy ideas come from? We're seeing some big money that are promoting it. Okay, and there's a younger generation coming along that is not buying the story. They're not buying the story, and that's a good thing. You know, people say, "Oh, the church is diminishing. We're going to go away." You take a look at the demonstrations that have been taking place in London. Millions of people have been out in the streets singing hymns. You know, Christians are standing up for themselves in places where they've been attacked and diminished, especially in Western Europe. And they're finally getting a hold of, hey, maybe some of these Western ideas are not so bad after all, because you take a look at the crap countries that some of these people came from and they brought their faith. Sorry, you know, why should we emulate them? So I think, you know, there are things that are happening. The next generation might not always be wrong. Okay, but they need to understand that some of the things that they're going to promote will be dysfunctional too. So be careful. All right. Here we go. Then the Israelites did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals, and they abandoned the Lord, the God of their ancestors, who brought them out of the land of Egypt. They followed other gods from among the gods of the people who were all around them and bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord and served Baal and Astartes. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers who plundered them, and he sold them into the power of their enemies all around, so that they could no longer withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them to bring misfortune, as the Lord had warned them and sworn to them, and they were in great distress. Then the Lord raised up judges who delivered them out of the power of those who plundered them, yet did not listen Yet they did not listen even to the judges, for they lusted after other gods and bowed down to them. They soon turned aside from the way in which their ancestors had walked, and their ancestors weren't all that great. I mean, give me a break here. Who had obeyed the commandments of the Lord, and they did not follow their example. Well, actually, they did follow their example. Their ancestors were not all that cool. Whenever the Lord raised up judges for them, the Lord was with the judge, and he delivered them from the hand of their enemies all the days of the judges. For the Lord would be moved to pity by their groaning because of those who persecuted and oppressed them. But whenever the judge died, they would relapse and behave worse than their ancestors, following their other gods, serving them and bowing down to them. They would not drop any of the practices or their stubborn ways. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he said, because this nation has transgressed my covenant that I commanded their ancestors, and have not obeyed my voice, I will no longer drive out before them any of the nations that Joshua left when he died, in order to test Israel whether or not they would take care to walk in the way of the Lord as their ancestors did. The Lord had left those nations, not driving them out at once, and had not handed them over to Joshua. Okay. So, that's chapter 2. All right. How does this happen? They started following the gods of the people who lived amongst them, who they were supposed to annihilate, by the way, okay? They weren't supposed to debate with them. They weren't supposed to convert them. They weren't supposed to persuade them. They were to kill them, okay? Well, if you have a religion that is based on nothing more than coercion, then you don't have a need for faith. All you need is power. And so, what were these kids looking at? They were looking at parents and grandparents who had committed genocide against people that they had gotten to know. They got to know them as neighbors. Different, but neighbors. Okay? And they were pagan, but they weren't all bad. Okay? They were following a different faith altogether. And when they thought about their parents and grandparents committing genocide against people like the guy next door, it bothered them a little bit. So now they are in conversation. And they're saying to themselves, the God who would lead my parents and grandparents to kill these people may not be the best God. Does that make sense? I mean, you look at
In their minds, but we know that God's righteous anger is to teach us what we're doing wrong and to bring us back to Him.
Yes.
And that's what the people were doing. They were they didn't kill their enemies, and God's righteous anger was allowing those people to stay there among them, and it's easier to follow the gods that they're following than it was to follow our God.
Okay, so what does that tell you about our God?
If you obey, He's going to look after you and take care of you.
That's
That's
true.
what He teaches us.
That is true. That is true. And you look at that and you say, well, that's the way it's supposed to be. Okay? But at the same time, this is the same God who has already predicted that I'm going to fail. This is the same God who is not doing very much to improve my options for not failing. Okay? This is a God who has very low expectations of me. And this is a God who is lethal against people that I know.
But this is God. This is our God. He is God, we are not.
I understand that.
And He is looking after our best interests. We don't understand it. But if we do as He asks, it'll be a good ending.
Yeah, that's true. But how hard is it to follow a God that you don't understand?
Well, we know today.
Right. Okay. Let me give you a kind of a thing where it shows how easy it is to fall into this stuff, okay? When I was doing disaster work, I worked very closely with the American Council of Churches, okay? And the Council of Churches was based in New York, and it was very ecumenical, but it was all about churches, how churches could work together and stuff. And I got to tell you, they were very, very helpful when it came to disaster work. They had a very good program. And when I came back here to North Carolina, and I was trying to help communities put together a community response organization, which they didn't have before, through my organization, I had the North Carolina Interfaith Disaster Response, and I was the leader of that. And I could come back and I could tell a community that if you will form an organization to help the community after this tornado has struck your town, that I can get you a $10,000 grant from the American Council of Churches. Okay, it was World Council of Churches, really, but and World Council of Churches is a horribly compromised organization. Just want you to know there are a lot of communists in it and stuff. But anyway, we could get them a grant and get them started. So in order for us to be eligible to apply for those grants, we had to go to their training events. So they had a retreat, a training event for people who were representing their denominations in disaster work. And because we were going to be working in different cultures, they wanted us to have a multicultural experience. So they brought in a shaman from Native American tribe, okay? And he was an interesting guy. He lived in a car with his girlfriend, but he was the shaman, and he would go around and do shaman things in the, hi, good morning, can I help you? Hey. We're good. I will. Okay. But anyway, he was doing shaman things. And so he was putting on a demonstration of a Native American, ceremony. And it had feathers and smoke and stuff like that. And he invited the representatives to participate in this. And a whole bunch of them just went up and volunteered. And here they are, waving the feathers and doing the smoke and all kinds of pagan things. I mean, it's not Christian, all right? And I'm standing back and I said, I came here to observe. I didn't come here to participate. And so I stood back and I watched all these great Christians doing pagan stuff just because, for one thing, they didn't understand what they were doing. And if you don't understand what you're doing, don't do it. Because, it could be a thing, So I didn't understand it, and I wasn't going to do it. And he really didn't explain what he was doing, but they were doing it. And they had the smoke and all that. I don't know what kind of spirits they brought in there. Okay? But it was easy because we're being open, and we're being communicative and participatory and all, so easy. And you take a look at what's happening on social media. Okay? And they can throw an idea out there. I mean, the Chinese, I know a little bit about the Chinese, okay? So TikTok is their thing. TikTok in China is not like TikTok here. TikTok in China is educational, okay? And you go to TikTok in China and your kids are going to get algebra. You go to TikTok here and you're going to get all kinds of crazy videos and, stuff and ideas, and it's really a Chinese propaganda thing. And they're going to make you think that the CCP is the most wonderful, outgoing, charming, and efficient organization in the whole wide world. Well, it's not. And by the way, they're stealing all your stuff, all your information. And, that's a real thing. That's a real thing. I know there are people who are doing business on TikTok and all of that. And they think, well, so what if they have my organization, my information? It's not a small thing that they have your information, okay? Because what they're doing is an in-depth study of American culture and how they can compromise it. Because that's what they do. That's their modus operandi. And so now, we're looking at maybe TikTok can become more American I don't think that we're going to outsmart the Chinese on that, because they're still going to have a 20% interest in TikTok, and all you need is a 1% interest of the Chinese in TikTok, and it's you're done. Okay, but these were the neighbors were social influencers. You know, it's like, hey, just come see what we're doing. And what they were doing looked like a lot of fun. Okay, they had all kinds of stuff going on. These fertility cults, really interesting. So, you know, they were enticing people to come over and be a part of that. And it's not that hard for people who are weak in their faith to be easily influenced. Especially if you have a generation that has some questions about the previous generation. They're going to be a lot more open to the influence of these other religions that for some reason have been going on for thousands of years and seem to be functional. So, you know, it's like these. The thing that's really interesting is that when Israel went in to take the territory, there was no debate. There was no debate. They just killed you. If you were other, they killed you. Okay? That was their intention, and that was their practice. But now, there are people that they didn't kill, and what you're finding is a dialogue taking place. And the people from the previous generation did not have a strong enough case for their kids to adhere to. They saw that it was brutal. They saw that it was intolerant. They saw that this God would turn on you in a heartbeat. There was no grace. Okay? You don't see, what you see is, okay, God sees them fall away, he sends a judge, and then the people follow the judge and they come back to the Lord, and the Lord kind of, fixes their situation, and then the judge dies and they fall away right away. Okay, this is a very shallow kind of faith. This is a faith that is easily challenged. And you see a God who's a pretty harsh God. This is a God who will turn on you and support your enemies in order to teach you a lesson. So understand, when there are options available, it's not unreasonable that somebody might follow those options. Okay? Just because God will reconsider and support you for a generation and then totally abandon you when you start to fall away. Okay? There is not a redeeming quality really about this God except for the harshness. And it reminds me a little bit about when I was a kid and we had evangelists come to our church and they had revivals, and all you heard was fire and brimstone. And it scared the hell out of you, and you wanted to get down to the altar so you wouldn't go there. And that was, when I was a kid, I could tell you what I didn't believe in more than I could tell you what I did believe in. Okay? So and after a while, it took me a long time to figure out that God was not looking for the small print in the contract to keep me out of heaven. That God really is a forgiving God, and that God is much more interested, not just in my salvation so I won't go to hell. God's interested in my salvation so that I can be a better person, and that I can grow and learn from my mistakes. Not have my mistakes drag me to hell, but so that my mistakes can teach me how to be better than I was. You're supposed to learn from your mistakes. Not be so scared of your mistakes that it's going to destroy you forever. So you see a redeeming quality. There's a redeeming quality in God that is not based on coercion. It's based on it's based on love and grace. A God who's willing to work with me despite me. Okay? What you see in the Old Testament and in Judges in particular is that you go through these good cycles, bad cycles, good cycles, bad cycles, over and da 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 da, and there is not really a climb. There's not something that makes them overall better. Okay, they only improve for the term of the life of the judge, and then it all goes to hell again. So it's there is not a progression taking place. They're not learning from their mistakes. They're repeating their mistakes over and over again. And the answer that God has is not really to show them necessarily a better way, it's to punish them, hoping that that will improve them somehow. Also consider this, that the Jewish conception of a Messiah is along the line of the judge. That a Messiah is a temporary fix. A Messiah is a temporary savior from some external threat. Okay? It's a Messiah that brings you back to your faith, makes you more responsive to the will of God, and that you follow the old ways, and then you are rescued from the persecution that your enemies are putting you under. Okay, so understand that a Jewish concept of Messiah is much more temporal than the Christian understanding of Messiah. But these are cyclic. They don't last long. Okay, and they're not learning from their mistakes. So there's not a progression taking place here. You're not getting better. What we're looking at over the course of human history, very gradually, incrementally, is that there has been an improvement. Okay, and we are improving all the time. We're learning, but the Christian understanding, and really the Jewish understanding too, because they're not like this today. Jews are not like this today. Okay, generally speaking, they're just not. There's no concept of doing a genocide or anything like that. They've progressed because they've been through hard times themselves, and they know that this is not the answer. You know, and Christians know that this is not the answer. And we used to practice that. I mean, Christianity has a really checkered past when it comes to what we thought about conversion. We were just as coercive as any other religion that uses coercion. So, we're getting past that. We're understanding that this is an expression of grace and love, not what it was back then. So there is a progression that's taking place, but in Judges, there's not a progression. It's just a bad cycle. Okay, well, that's kind of what I have for today. Welcome your comments, and I'm at revlev@ncc.umc or mccumc.org, and you can email me. Glad to have you aboard. And if you like Apple Jacks, maybe come out to the class sometime. See you next week.